So you guys, yesterday, when you did the trading game, right, you had to associate value with the paperclip, right? And then convince someone it was a value so they would trade with you. And so that whole concept of associating value and getting something for it is a really important part of being a startup founder and having a startup. And let me explain. So, business models. Why are business models such an important part of your startup business? It's how you make money. And you need to make money so that your company becomes worth more and the investment of the investor grows with the value of your company. So it's how you make money, but not just revenues. You have to be a profitable business. You have to make more money than you spend to run the business. We've been working over the last 2 days a lot on the value proposition part of your startup business. It is, what is the core need? What is the customer with the need? What is the value, the solution that you're creating to address the need of that customer, right? So we've been focusing on the value proposition. However, you have to spend just as much time on the value extraction part of the business. And the value extraction part of the business is where you figure out how to make money, where you're trying to extract value from what you're offering. Is that easy? Not always. I mean, it seems like some people seem to make money in every which way, and some people never figure out how to make money, even though they work so hard, right? And some people it comes naturally, some people it doesn't. The ones who it doesn't come naturally, you need to develop that skill within yourself if you're going to be a startup entrepreneur. So somehow I have to struggle at doing value extraction, but somehow my two sons do not. Okay? Like, I'll give you an idea. Okay, who is Max besides him? Who's the Max I've been talking about? It's my son. So, Max, is going to high school, and then, he comes home and he always throws his stuff everywhere around. And I look at his wallet and it looks really fat. And I know that I don't give him very much money. And he loves to hang out with his friends and buy boba teas, and he doesn't have much money. But all of a sudden, his wallet is really fat. So I open his wallet. Okay, there's no such thing as privacy with a Chinese mother. Okay, let's just establish that. Okay. And so I look at his wallet and he's got $200 in here. Okay, I give him $10 a week and he spends it. So where does he get $200? So I'm like, Max, where'd you get all this money? He's like, Mom, what do you think? Do you think I'm selling drugs? And I'm like, how did you? He said, well, what happens is Max is not an early person. He doesn't wake up till 10 a.m. Class starts at 8. So what he does is across the street from his high school is a grocery store. He goes in the grocery store and buys a Monster drink. Do you guys know Monster? It's like Red Bull. So he buys a Monster drink and then walks to class and drinks it so he can stay awake for the first 2 hours. And his friends are saying to him, hey, Max, dude, buy me a Monster too. So Max is like, yeah, sure. So he goes to Safeway and he buys 5 Monsters for $1 a piece, and he takes them to school and he sells them for $5 a piece. And So that's how he'd been doing it for 2 months, and that's how he made $200. So, yes, he was selling drugs, caffeine. So, do you see that way? So let me give you an example. Is when I was getting my MBA at Berkeley, I did the evening program. So the evening program is for people who work during the day, and you can go and you can work on your MBA at night. And so all my fellow students all had jobs like me. And a lot of the students would miss class because they had to work late or they had to go travel, right? And I took really good notes, right? And what I would do is look in the class and say, "Oh, Sophia's not here today. Oh, she must have had to go on a business trip to New York." So I would take my notes and I would go to work the next day. I worked for Quaker Oats. We had beautiful copy machines. And I'd feed it in the copy machine and make a couple sets of notes. And I'm like, "Oh, hey, Sophia, you missed class. I made you a copy of notes." "Oh, Ava, you were sick yesterday. I made you a copy of notes." And they're both like, "Thank you." See, that was a value proposition. I noticed that they missed class, they needed notes, and I gave them the notes. Is that good? Am I missing something here? Exactly. So, what happened was a few years after business school, I'm listening to this entrepreneur speak. And this entrepreneur's like, you know, you ladies, you know those guys, right? Yeah, you know, I was always an entrepreneur. You know, like I was starting businesses ever since I was little. And you know what? When I was in business school at UCLA, I took really good notes and I sold them to my classmates and paid for my degree. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Because I didn't have the mentality of value extraction. And I have to admit, it's partly cultural because when I was growing up, my father, we got in Chinese culture, you don't get presents. What do you get in Chinese culture in lieu of presents? You get red envelopes filled with money. And so if it was Chinese New Year's, my grandma and aunts and uncles would give me red envelopes and I'm like, "Oh, look how many I have." And my dad say, "It's not good to want money. That makes you greedy." So he kind of conditioned wanting money out of me. Okay? That was a bad move, Dad. Okay? So but in order to make money, you have to be thinking about how do we make money? How do we make money? And yesterday, part of the exercise is how do we trade this for something more? Instead of doing money, you're basically how do we get something more for what we have? And then how do we get something more? So think about business models. How do companies make money? How do companies in this world make money? So you sell products, sell services. How else? What? Provide an experience. Well, you save on costs. That's how you cut costs. But just think, how about an apartment? You rent the apartment. How about what I did for World of Warcraft? I paid for a subscription. So traditional business models are sell a product or service. Okay? There is time and materials. That is, you pay a contractor for their time to work on your house and the materials they use. Freemium. You guys have all done freemium, right? Advertising. That's the one people miss the most, but that's actually one of the biggest ways to make money in this world is advertising. Rent or lease or subscription. So those are all like traditional ways of making money. But investors are very interested in startups that have innovative new business models, sometimes even more than technology. Okay? The new innovative ones, they transform the way we do things, it transform processes and the way we do business. They identify totally new revenue streams that hadn't been identified before. And with the digital world, it's enabled all these new ways to make money. Like, Venmo, Airbnb, TikTok, WeChat, all these things are new ways to deliver products and services and make money. So, to kind of help you get in this mode of thinking of value extraction, let's look at current companies and how they make money. All right? Google or Alphabet. How does Alphabet make money? Ding, ding, ding. You got it? They make advertising. So Alphabet makes from Google search and AdWords, they make more than 50% of their money. And then they make ads from YouTube's and their other services. Other stuff like Google Cloud, less than 10%. So they make most of their money from advertising. Good. Now, Amazon. How does Amazon make money? What? They cloud services? Okay. How else does Amazon make money? AWS, which is cloud services. What? Sales commissions. Okay, absolutely. So if you look at Amazon, they make 43% of their revenues from Amazon stores. And they make another 23% by selling products for other stores. So if you go into Amazon, you will see it's not sold by Amazon, it's sold by some third-party seller. And then they take a chunk of that money. And then Amazon Web Services is now 15.6%. It used to be 0, but now it's growing. Amazon really loves Amazon Web Services because it's the most profitable business. They make the biggest delta between the revenues and costs. Now, let me ask you a question. How did Amazon start? They started books. They started selling books, but this teeny weeny here. Okay? See how focused they were? They did a really good job, and then they expanded. One thing about business models is I told you to be really focused on the target segment and the product that you offer. You also need to be very focused on the business model. You want to offer one solution to one target segment and one business model. You can always add more later, but you always want to keep it simple so that your customer doesn't get confused, you don't get confused, and you're not trying to do too many things as a small startup. One thing that was really cool yesterday is when Ryan was talking to you, he actually gave you a whole bunch of resources. You can go to the Oxbridge, the Oxfordshire Resources Library System and get a lot of research for free and stuff. They actually have those subscriptions. So you don't have to be like me. You don't have to bribe your friend to get you the reports. Okay? But that's how you keep costs low. The next one is Apple. How does Apple make money? What? iCloud is one way Apple makes money. Okay, what products? Okay, if you look at Apple makes over 50% of their money from iPhones. Why do you think they keep launching iPhone every year? Because this is where they make most of their money. And right here, the services, the iMusic, the stuff that I buy, it's very small. But this is a very important part of the business because when I buy music, it traps me into buying only iPhones. And every year this iPhone goes up $100. My last iPhone was $1,500. You tell me that in pounds, okay? So, but Apple, when it started, what did they offer? What was Apple's first product? That was a Macintosh computer. The Macintosh computer. They had a computer and they sold computers as their business model. Very focused. The next one is Microsoft. How does Microsoft make money? Azure, which is enterprise services, OS. What was Microsoft's first business? They were selling operating systems for the IBM PC. Look how focused they were. Microsoft sold operating systems for IBM PCs. But now, there are, out of all these companies that I'm showing, they're the oldest. So if you see right here is Windows operating systems is 10%. Then they have the Azure, which is the enterprise, and they're like 37%. So you see, they keep adding new products. They come up with a new product, a new business model, either make it succeed or make it fail, and either they kill it or not. Oh, there was one product that Amazon launched, and then they killed because it wasn't working. Does anyone remember? Exactly, she's right. Amazon launched a phone, and for 2 years, they marketed it. It didn't work. They said, all right, this is a waste. Let's kill it. And then they went on to cloud services. So work on something, either it matures or it doesn't, then kill it and move on. Okay, the next one is Facebook. What's Facebook? It's all advertising. Facebook keeps trying to do new things, AR, VR, they still don't make money. They tried crypto, they still don't make money. So I don't know where they're gonna go. Now, NVIDIA. How does NVIDIA make money? What? GPUs for graphics. Okay, the interesting thing with NVIDIA is their GPU business is only 44%. Their networking chips are now up to 56%. So they started with GPUs, graphic chips, right? And then the graphic chips had to process a lot of data. So they had a lot of parallel processing. So as a result, that was the perfect approach and architecture to port over to AI, because you have to process a lot of data. So they happen to be in the right place at the right time with the right product. So this is a great book. This book is really easy to read. It's this presentation is already uploaded into the shared drive that you guys can get. 4 is a book written about how the 4 companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, how when their early days, they were figuring out new ways to make money. And the way they were thinking about it and creativity, you're just like, whoa, and get really inspired. That's how they figured out these new ways to make money and become such juggernauts. And where did this guy, Scott Galloway, go to school? What? Berkeley. I should find an example of an Oxford person, right? Anyways, trends in society drive business models. So back in the 1950s, that was following the tail of the mass production of cars that Ford did. Then McDonald's looked at that and go, oh, we can do mass production of burgers. So they did the mass production lines of burgers. And 1970s, transportation became really good. Transportation infrastructure became really good in the US. And so companies like FedEx came up with the idea of let's do door-to-door delivery the next day. You want to see something cool? You see in the FedEx? Do you see there's a little arrow here in the logo? That was a really good logo design. Then 1990s, the internet emerged. And then people like Jeff Bezos went, we can sell things on the internet. And then Southwest Airlines said, oh, we can sell plane tickets on the internet. And you got this huge wave of e-commerce. And then the 2000s, you got into digital content, a lot of digital content. So as you do what you're doing, some of the startups that are successful, they're very good at catching the wave of what's in society. And what I mean is like, if you go surfing and you're too early for the wave goes past you. And you don't catch the wave and ride it in. If you're too late, if you're too late, the wave goes past you. If you're too early and you're ahead, the wave simply crashes over you and you don't ride the wave. So the trick is to do your timing so you catch what's happening in society. All right. What are some major trends that happened in 2010 to 2020? Because at least you guys were alive then. There's one major trend that almost all of us succumb to. Not everyone does social media. Smartphones. Look at this. Lorraine, if I took this away from you, how would you feel? A lot. Like, this is our life support system, right? Here's the fun thing. Who's married here? Okay. Is that it? You're the only one? Okay. Helen. Where's Helen? She escaped. Okay. My question is, what's the first thing you look at in the morning? Your husband or your phone? What? Oh, she's good. No wonder she's still married. Okay. But the smartphone was a big deal in 2010 to 2020. And all these companies that got really big, basically rode on the smartphones, the smartphone apps, food delivery, restaurant reservations, Airbnb, all these things really rode on the adoption of the cell phones. Other things that happened in the 2020s was some cryptocurrency. Oh my God, my students show up to class driving a new BMW. I'm like, how'd you do that? Bitcoin. Okay. Or genetics got really big is with the decrease in cost of machine learning and the ability to compute faster and faster and cheaper. Before, it took $1 million to get a DNA profile of yourself. Now it costs 100. And so now you can look up your DNA. I don't know if I told you guys, right? But my husband just got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so we're going through all the issues, getting the PET scan, getting the MRI. But the latest thing that they've now told him to do is to get a genetic test for two reasons, is to see if his cancer is genetic, and so how to pass it and whether or not his sons are at risk. And then the other reason to do the genetic test is to understand what is the genetic profile of the tumor so they can figure out what's the best way to treat this tumor. And this was all made possible with the decrease in cost for computing. And now it's an affordable tool to harness for anyone who has cancer. I mean, it's just mind-blowing, isn't it? And so, like, the mortality rate of prostate cancer, or that someone lives beyond 5 to 10 years, is over 95%. So very, very few people pass away because we've got all these tools. All right. Some major trends in 2020. What's been happening this decade that we're in? Like, think about what happened in 2020. What? COVID. And so COVID resulted in us totally adopting online. Online became, hey, there's something we can do. You can't be there, be online. Hi, Ukrainians. Hi, I wish you guys were here. Okay. but it enabled, like now, the students who couldn't make it here from Ukraine to be able to sit in the class and learn too. And then also there's been the autonomous car. If you ever come to San Francisco, oh my God, the city is flooded with autonomous taxis. And now it's getting to the point there's more autonomous taxis than regular taxis. Yeah. It like Google has launched like 1,000 taxis. It's so cool. And then you get in the taxi and you try talking to the driver. They're very antisocial. Okay. Then you've got drones. And I mean, drones has been huge. People thought that drones were going to be used for delivery, but with all these wars, especially in Ukraine and Russia, the drones have played such a major part. We started off the 2000s with Mark Zuckerberg going Meta, AR, VR. But I think 2020 was still a little bit early for VR, and he changed his tune. He doesn't talk about VR anymore because he kind of hit the wave too early, and it didn't catch it. And now it's all about ChatGPT, LLMs. And the interesting thing is the first 5 years of this decade were about sustainability. Okay. But now with the orange monster, okay, he's killed all the sustainability projects. So I need to put an X through there. And I should just go terrorists, terrorists, terrorists. All right. The thing about these trends in society, they negatively impact business. So when COVID started, Peloton became skyrocketed because everyone's buying a Peloton. And you got on the community, and you would sit at home during COVID and participate in exercise classes with your friends. And so my girlfriends all had Pelotons, and they were all like, oh, Gigi, you should come and join us. Andre is teaching at 4 p.m. and he's got such a cute butt. Well, I did not have a Peloton, so I never got into the Andre wave. But as a result, Peloton went up to being worth $600 million as a company, while Nordic Track was only worth $70 million, even though Nordic Track has better equipment, because they caught the wave of COVID. But the thing about Peloton is that they did not plan for the trend going down. Once people went back to the gym, no one got onto Peloton to watch Andre's butt anymore. They just watched the real butt in the gym. Okay? So you also have to pay attention. Like, is business going to do it? Like, honestly, with all these tariffs, all these companies are looking at the tariffs are increasing our costs. What are we going to do to change our costs? Or do we need to change our business model? Or do we need to go to a different market? Because with tariffs, our products are going to be too expensive for our current markets. So business models are not easy. It is actually, to be honest, one of the hardest things to come up with business models. So I want to make sure that you guys spend enough time thinking about your business model, how you're going to make money, and not just thinking about making a great product. So in 1998, Google came out and they got millions of users, free search, really fast, free keyword-based search. Okay. They got $1 million of funding from the investors because they thought it was a really high value proposition. But after 2 years, the investor said to Google, you guys need to figure out how to make money. We let you go and get all the users, but now you got to make money, because if you don't make money, we don't make money. So what Google did was very, very interesting. Is the founders, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they didn't go sit in an office and whiteboard. Okay? Some of you are all like, let's huddle. What they did was they sent a challenge to everyone in their company. And they said, everyone, submit an idea on how you think we can make money. And one engineer submitted the idea for AdWords. And now AdWords still makes over 50% of the revenue. So, do you think this guy is rich now? He's very rich, because when Google went public, when IPO, the lowest level person walked away with 15 million. Okay. So yes, he probably has an island in the South Pacific. So now it still generates. Now look at Twitter. You guys know Twitter? What's it called now? X. And what happened to Twitter? It got bought by Elon Musk. Do you know why it got bought by Elon Musk? Why they had to sell to Elon Musk? Is Twitter didn't spend time on value extraction. And for years, they didn't make money. They were bleeding, and they kept raising money. And they kept raising money, even though they had billions of users. And it was only till like the last year before they sold that they finally made a little bit of money. And they couldn't sustain. So they had to put themselves on the market. And guess who bought them? And now my cute little bird is gone. And it's just an ugly X. All right. Do you see how important? You can come up with a great product that the world loves, but if you don't make money. All right. So business models change over time. This is my first printer that I bought in 1992. And this printer cost me $2,000. Is that crazy? Okay. Yeah, but it was awesome. It was a laser jet printer. And I only had to replace the ink in it like once every 5 years. So the business model there is to sell an expensive piece of hardware. Okay, but now in today's world, the HP printers cost less than 100, or they're free. They come with the computer. So what happened? Is HP making a lot less money now? They get you to buy ink. Like I probably spent $200 or $300 a year on ink. All right. So this is a super important point. Are you ready? Drum roll. Okay. The point I want to make is recurring revenue has longer lifetime value. So, in the one time $2,000, great, they get $2,000. But once they use it up, there's no more money coming in to sustain the company. So what investors are looking for is recurring revenue. Money keeps coming in. Like, you know what? Max, he asked for my credit card to buy World of Warcraft and was $15 a month. I did not catch the fact that I was playing for his, what is the word? For his corruption for 15 months. Ka-ching, ka-ching. So I paid $15 for 15 months, and I paid $225. And I used to pay $40 for an Xbox game, and I was over and done with. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Okay, I will tell you more about the World of Warcraft story later on. All right, so DC, think about it. When you're coming up with revenue models, recurring revenue models. Yes, Rid? I actually, if you really look at it, I don't think it's a trend. I think that in the past, it was hard to collect subscriptions because it means you had to go mail something to someone had to send it to you, and chasing down people to pay was hard. But with the internet, credit card, ka-ching, 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 it's easy as heck to collect money on a regular basis. I mean, in the olden days here in England, right? You had an estate with a lord, and they had to hire an estate manager. And the estate manager every month, had to go chase down each of the people who owned the cottages to get their rent. If they weren't there, they had to come back the next day. So chasing down that regular money was much harder in the physical world. But with the internet world, it's on my credit card, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And so I think moving forward with the internet, it is going to be recurring revenue. It takes longer. Yep. You're right.
Subscription, and the person cannot use the screen without subscription. Literally, then they will use the screen for years.
Yeah.
The lifetime of these things is a lot shorter. So if you buy a printer that's, like £50 and it lasts you 10 months, like the subscription, by the time you get
Okay.
10 months, it might switch to someone else.
Okay. Yeah. So just I'll kind of go back to, yes, it is going to be subscription now. Subscription is a dominating model. And in some cases, people are making like washers to not last as long, but that's not really sustainable because you get the income maybe once every 5 years. But what I bought an Electrolux refrigerator. Okay. You know what they're doing? That refrigerator requires 2 filters, a water filter and an air filter. And every 6 months, they're like, Gigi, your water filter is no longer functional. It's old. So your air filter's this, like you need to buy more. I'm like, wait a moment. I am spending $400 a year buying stupid filters, and the damn refrigerator only costs $1,000. Do you see how they're forcing me into a recurring revenue model? And then, and the thing is it sends a red alert if I don't change it. So obnoxious. Anyways, I figured out how to override the alert. Okay. But do you see how recurring revenue? I'm going to talk more about this, but it is the model that investors want to see because this has long-term lifetime value. Okay. LinkedIn's business has changed a lot. Okay. Have you guys learned in this class that you really need to be on LinkedIn? It's LinkedIn is the business connection platform of the West. They don't use LinkedIn in China and stuff, but now when you apply for a job, one of the first things the person's going to look at your LinkedIn. I don't know if you look, but in the agenda, everyone that's speaking, I link to their LinkedIn because that is expected to be the most up-to-date info about you professionally. So LinkedIn, when it first started, they launched in 2003. 2006, they had a lot of users and they said, okay, we need to focus on value extraction. We need to focus on developing a business model. They started with premium subscription, trying to get people to migrate to $10 a month premium services. And it didn't work. Less than 10% of users wanted to migrate. Okay. I was one of the few, right? So they said, oh, that's not working. It's not really generating a lot of revenue. So then they introduced advertising. They tried to put advertising. No one wants to see advertising on a professional site. It made the users mad. So they said advertising is not working. So then they came up with their third business model is they said, we have this valuable data of all these professional people in the world working. And you know who that's valuable to? Recruiters and headhunters. So they built tools for recruiters and headhunters to mine LinkedIn to find the right person to recruit. Because if a recruiter recruits an engineer and places them for 100,000, they get 6 months of salary. So they get paid 50,000 for placing an engineer for 100,000. And so this recruiting platform was about 30,000 a year. But if a person places 10 people at 50,000, they've made 500,000. So that LinkedIn, the recruiting tools on LinkedIn became its first successful business model. It was the third business model they tried. So it's not easy. You got to keep trying. Twitter didn't try hard enough, and now we have the big, ugly X. All right. What? Say that again? Yeah. They were trying not to sell, but because they didn't make money, in the end, they had no choice but to sell. Yeah, but yeah, that's true. But still, if they had really made money much earlier, they could have done so much more. You know, they just, yeah. Yeah, it was a combination of, at the end of the day, the fact that they weren't profitable was a big contributor. And the second part was greed on the shareholder to take all the money that that Elon offered. The thing is Elon took out a lot of loans to back up his purchase of Twitter, and the loans were based on the value of Tesla. So if Tesla crashes, Elon may have to renege on some of those. So that's things happening up there. Okay, so moving on, LinkedIn added another fourth business model called LinkedIn Learning. And now they offer learning services. So you can pay for seminars on LinkedIn. Okay, they were acquired by Microsoft. Interestingly enough, in 2023, they actually had 16 billion of revenue, and there's a huge uptake in that premium services. You know, the service that didn't work the first time, now because they have so much data, and people right now realize that they can actually use that data. I use LinkedIn. I'll tell you how I use LinkedIn. Okay, I use LinkedIn, and you know what I did? I'm going to be teaching in Oxford. Let me find out who I know in Oxford. And because I have the premium services, I can find people in Oxford for the right profile. And so I'm looking really hard to find a female investor to come and listen to you pitch, because I don't want to just pitch to men. What do you guys think? But so that's how I'm using LinkedIn, okay? Business models change over time. This is a biomedical AI company in Japan. They screen compounds to determine whether or not they're good candidates to be developed as a drug, as an antibiotic or whatever. And in the beginning, they had no data. They just had their algorithms. So they basically charged $20,000 to process 100 compounds. But once they gathered all this data on all these compounds, they started having a database. So then they could sell access to access to some of the data. And now when they get a gigantic database, they could sell a master database antibody license to all these compounds to like Pfizer. Do you see? So the value of what's in the company changes over time. And as a result, the business model taking advantage of what's in the company can change over time. So you guys can show multiple business models, but not all at one time. So you might say phase 1, you have this business model. Phase 2, you have this business model. Phase 3. Don't show a list of business models that you'll do all at the same time. Is that clear? Okay. Okay, going back to just math. At the end of the day, when you're figuring out business models, it all comes down to profits equals revenues minus costs. So everything comes back to this. When you're looking at it, you're always thinking of revenues. Does something going to increase the revenues? Is something going to decrease costs? Because if it's going to help your business model, it's going to increase profitability. So Uber. Was Uber a technology innovation? It wasn't. They didn't develop any technology. What Uber did was simply use existing technology to support a new service. So the service was to get someone from point A to point B in the driver's personal car. So what Uber did is they eliminated the cost of a driver. They didn't have to hire a whole bunch of drivers like a taxi company. They also didn't have to buy a bunch of cars like a taxi company. So they pretty much eliminated the costs of having a transportation business. Isn't that brilliant? And so Uber was a business model innovation. It's in trying to figure out your business model, it's all about identifying value. That's what we were trying to get you to do with the paperclip. Was to kind of associate with value and then have someone want the value. What do you have a value? Who would benefit? Who is willing to pay for it? Often there's more value than the product itself. So right here, a handy phone. When I left my phone back there, so if you use yours. So when I take my phone to Hong Kong, or even here to the UK, do you know what? I pay $12 a day to get roaming services from AT&T. And I can ask Adam, and it doesn't work. My phone doesn't work. And I'm like, Adam, call this number. Why am I paying $12? But I go into Hong Kong, I go into my hotel room, and there's this phone. Gigi, handy phone. And you get free calls to the US, free internet. What? Why am I paying $12 yet something's for free? Is something wrong with this picture? Why would they give it to me for free? To trial it? Maybe, but I'm not going to buy a handy phone because it was an Android and I'm sticking with my iPhone. It was in a hotel. Good thought. No, the hotel was not paying for it. What? You're close. See what they were looking at. So what Handy Phone was, is they were selling advertisers to local merchants. So I would take the Handy Phone, walk around the streets of Hong Kong, and they could see, oh, Gigi's close to Noodle Shop. And Noodle Shop would sell advertising. So, oh, come into this noodle shop. We have the best wontons in all of Hong Kong. And so what they were selling was the eyeballs of a rich visitor to Hong Kong. They weren't selling phone services. They were selling the eyeballs of rich services to Hong Kong. Decent. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Like for example, Sophia, do you ever see ads on Google? Is that ethical? You're using Google for free. There is no such thing as free. You're really selling yourself. Isn't that crazy? Okay, this is a company that I mentor in Taiwan. It's called FIO. They have a platform for developers to build apps on blockchain. Okay, so people want to build apps on blockchain, they do that. But they focused on the solar energy company. So solar energy companies in the US collect solar energy and they sell energy. But contrary to what people believe, energy is not that expensive. We were used to getting energy dirt cheap. Now it's gone up and we're all complaining about energy prices. But energy still is not that expensive. So people who generate solar energy, they get money for it, but it isn't a big profit. And so a lot of the solar energy companies are struggling. Okay, It's a solar energy company. What is associated with solar energy? It's a renewable source of energy. So it's actually associated with carbon credits. So basically, what Field does is create a platform that it gathers the data, how this energy is generated, and it's generated through solar, and it packages that data into a carbon credit and then distributes it on blockchain. And so it becomes a carbon credit that is completely proven and not fake. And all these companies in Europe that are trying to meet the zero carbon will buy these carbon credits. And so basically what's happening is the solar energy companies, not only are they generating energy, but they also have value of the carbon credits associated with the way they generate energy. Does that make sense? It's really cool. Okay. Oh, fun one. Who is the customer? Okay. These are these junk pizza rolls. The frozen, you heat them up in the US. Okay. Tell me, what does a customer do? What? A customer may buy a product. What else may a customer do? Yep, can subscribe, consume the product. Okay. So the customer for these pizza rolls is the user. That's my younger son, Zach. I'm starting to talk about Zach now, not just about Max. Too bad, Max. Too bad there's not a Zach in this room. Okay. And he's always like, Mommy, can you buy me some Tostinos? Because I'm a bad mom. I'm always working. I don't have time to cook. So he has to have something to cook himself. So I will buy him Tostinos and keep them in the freezer. Then, who's the other customer besides Zach? Me. Oh, my husband too. But it's actually me. I go and buy all the Tostinos. And did you notice Tostinos has a lot of growth hormones in it? Did you get it? Did you see how tall Zach is compared to me? And that is my son. Maternity is guaranteed. Paternity is assumed. Okay? And the other customer is the store. If the store doesn't carry them, I can't buy them. Zach can't eat them. So the point I want to make here is everyone in your customer value chain must benefit. Okay, think of who's involved in getting the solution to your customer, and everyone has to benefit. If they don't benefit, if the trucking company doesn't make enough money, they're not going to ship your product to the store. Do you see? So think about all the people in the value chain. Nothing is free. Google is not free. They're using our data and shoving so many ads to us, forcing us to buy stuff we don't want. And they're making hundreds of billions of dollars. And they give us free email, free search, free drives. And so nothing's free. I went to this restaurant in Amsterdam, and it said free Wi-Fi. Yay, I'm going to go in the restaurant, get free Wi-Fi, and do some emails and eat my dinner. But before I could log on, they said you have to log on to Facebook. What? Okay. Then when I log on to Facebook, before they give me internet, they want me to like the restaurant. And I haven't even gotten any food. Okay. So I looked this up, and liking someone on Facebook drives as much traffic to the restaurant as if they spent $174 on Google Ads. So I just gave them $174 of advertising, and they still charged me $20 for dinner. So was the internet free? No, nothing is free. Somebody is paying. It might not be you. And most of the time, it's your parents. Okay. Identify who has the money. Is this plant-based pesticide was developed at a university in Taiwan. It's this plant-based pesticide. It keeps the worms from eating tea leaves. And that way the tea leaves don't have these gigantic holes. Isn't that cool? And it's plant-based, so it's not chemical. Who do you think they should try and sell it to? What? Farmers? That's a logical one. They tried, but the farmers didn't have any money. So they have this great product, a value proposition, but no one to sell it to. So they thought, who makes money off of tea? And it's actually the tea companies. These tea companies will buy a ton of tea from a farmer for $10, and they package it into hundreds of packages, and they make $10,000, right? So they're making a ton of money. So they said, oh, we'll buy that. And then they gave it to the farmers. Here's some free pesticide, free organic pesticide. It'll help you take care of your plants and save them from worms. So the farmers used it. Since the farmers didn't pay for it, then they sold the 1,000 pounds for $10 again. And now the tea people packaged it up and sold it for twice as much because it's organic. So when you guys are looking at who are you going to go to get money, go to the people who have the money. Go to the people who are making the money. I mean, I see all these startups, especially in universities, and they're like, we're going to sell to researchers. So who's a researcher in here? Okay, Ava, you're a researcher, right? Do you have a lot of money to spend? Okay, your lab is running out of money. So you better not come up with a business model that you're selling to a research lab because you know they don't have any money. Do you see? Find someone who has the money. Make it easy to collect money. Dell collects it in every shape and form. You can even buy a Dell computer with Bitcoin. Okay? This is really interesting. And Rid, this will go back to your recurring revenue thing, is one of the things that you want to do to get revenue rolling is overcome the barrier to adoption. What is preventing someone from adopting your product? What's preventing someone? So when solar came out, to get solar at your house, you had to spend $50,000 to buy installation. Who has $50,000 sitting to buy a solar installation? A lot of people like the idea of having solar on their house, but they didn't have 50,000. So Solar City came up with an idea where problem is people don't have 50,000. But what if we raise a lot of money, we buy all the solar panels and solar equipment, and we simply lease it month by month to homeowners. And then solar adoption skyrocketed. And also some other revenue streams came in that if a house generates more energy than they use, Solar City would sell it back to the energy provider. And so they also made money with excess energy. So Solar City didn't make any new technology. They simply did a new business model for offering solar to homeowners. And Solar City addressed the barrier to adoption and went crazy. Want to see something funny? There was this beautiful building in Silicon Valley. See how it has all these triangles? I love this building. I drive past it on the freeway, and it was built by a company called Sutardja, which had really leading edge solar panel technology. So they had tubes inside the panels, and because it was tubes, it would catch the sun at optimum angles, no matter where it was. And it maximized the amount of energy collected from the sun. Is that awesome? This company was funded for hundreds of millions of dollars, and it went bankrupt because China came out with cheaper panels. But guess what? Let me ask you, who do you think, just for fun, do we still have the treats here? I just want one treat. This is my favorite pastry from Taiwan. It's a pineapple cake. Do you see this big, beautiful building? When Sutardja went under, who do you think bought the building? Sort of close. What it was before Tesla. City. Yep, you got it. Woo! Hey, you should join the Dodgers. All right. Solar City bought it. So, what does it tell you? At the end of the day, it's the business model that rules and not the technology. For all you researchers, do you feel like you went into the wrong site, the wrong domain? Okay. So, transforming cost to revenue. And RID, this is really relevant to what you asked. This is a TV show way back when. It was Hawaii Five-0, and that's Jack Lord. He's a policeman. Every week, they bought him a new car. He drove around chasing the bad guys, crashed the car. And then the movie studio bought another car. So what was the car in the math equation? It was a cost, right? Fast forward, they got the new Hawaii Five-0, okay? And every week, these guys chase around a bad guy and they crash the car. But guess what? Do they pay for the car? No. They expect the car companies to donate the car and pay them to use the car. Wait a moment. What happened? This used to be a cost for their business and they made it into a revenue generator? What happened was the TV studios realized they were giving more value in advertising to car companies than the value of a stupid old car. And so basically, this is a General Motors truck. And if General Motors said, we're not paying you, they're like, screw you. We're going to go use a Ford truck. Or we'll go use a stupid cyber Tesla truck. Cyber truck. Do you see what I mean? Because they'll pay us to use it. Because they will give a lot of advertising. From products, so IBM. Do you guys know IBM? What's IBM known for? What? Huh? Losing lots of customers. But why? What did IBM start out as? They started out with computers, selling hardware. They completely eliminated all their hardware business. Now, all my students do not buy cars. Well, except the ones that have Bitcoin and want to buy fancy BMWs to show off. The rest of them don't buy cars. They simply subscribe to a service to a car. Even Volvo is offering a monthly subscription to a Volvo. So why are all these companies moving away from selling a product to offering a service? It's still a service, which leads to a hard product. Yeah, and because it is starts with an R, recurring revenue. Okay, crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is just simply getting other people to do the work to keep your costs low. Who does this? Who has done this in the last week? Raise your hand. Do you guys realize that you are being used? Do you know who is using you? Which company is using you? Huh? Google. You are being used by Google to build up their machine learning databases to operate their Waymo taxis. Okay? You think Google stuff is free? They are harnessing you. You are actually one of their slaves. They are crowdsourcing you to then make their machine learning databases. Personally, I think there is billions of poor people in the world that Google should be paying to do this. But no, they don't want to spend money because they want to buy yet another yacht. So they make us do it. And they keep their costs low. God, don't you feel there's just no way around it. I can't even get into the app that I bought without doing this stupid thing to verify my, it's so horrible. Okay, this is a soap opera in what is that country? In Korea. Lots of people love it, and so they ask their fans to write translations. See, fans write translations for free, and this company sells them. Crowdsourcing. Okay, now we're going to go to the last part. In today's world, you've got to figure out how to make more money by harnessing data. Got it? So it's about harnessing data to improve profits. How do you harness data to increase revenues? How do you harness data to decrease costs? And this isn't just on the internet. Like restaurants who have iPads and they take all the orders on the iPads, they're capturing data. So they can look at that data and go, people order lots of fish on Fridays. They don't order fish on Mondays. So it gives them the knowledge to not order fish on Fridays so they don't waste it. And it gives them the knowledge to buy more fish on Fridays so that they have enough fish to meet the demand and make more money. So every business should be harnessing data to either increase revenues, decrease costs. United Airlines, I can go and see exactly where my bag is on any flight. The bag has arrived. The bag is on the plane. Why is United giving me, the customer, access to the data? How is that affecting their math equation? So you're saying that by having that, the customer will fly United more often, so increase revenues. Ding, ding, ding. That's why they're doing it. Now, they used to have 2 people in luggage to handle claims. There's only 1 because most people don't go and wait in line. They just look on their phone. See, they're taking that data and go, what can we do with the data? Oh, let's just share the data with the customer. Now they won't ask us and we can fire somebody. Yeah. Google's all about collecting data. I've talked to you about Doodle forever. It used to be Google only had the first 2 were ads. Now they have 2 pages of ads. And look at your poor grandmother who's using Google. She doesn't know to look at this and say ad, 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 and go down and find the right one. So that's why all these old people are being suckered by fraud, by this, by that. They just don't know. My husband, he saw this thing and he goes, oh my God, there's a virus. And you know what he did? He canceled all of his bank accounts. Oh my God. And then it took 2 months to reinstate them. And I'm like, honey, next time that happens, just ask me. I will go and take the virus off your computer. Oh my God. Oh, anyways. PayPal was a really big peer-to-peer transaction. So, I want to pay Yara. Oh, Yara, you did something for me. Let me pay you with PayPal. Okay. And that was the big payment thing. But now all my students want me to pay them with Venmo. None of them have PayPal. So I thought, okay, PayPal's old. It's going to die. But when I looked it up, guess who owns Venmo? PayPal. So PayPal is a transaction fee model for us old people willing to pay transaction fees. You young people want everything free. So they're actually taking your data when you use these payment things that are free, because nothing is free. Okay, Skin Vision is a company that's gathering skin lesions, and you look at it and it tells you, ooh, that's dangerous. Go see your doctor. They have the biggest database of melanomas in the world, and their biggest customers are European health insurance companies because they can see trends for skin cancers. This robot vacuums, they actually collect data on the inside of your house. And for a while there, in the beginning, you had to opt out. So they're and gathering data on the inside of your house. And it's like, oh, Gigi, you have a lot of space. Maybe you should buy a couch. Or Square is a payment option for merchants. Like my husband, when I started going out with him, he didn't take credit cards. He only took cash and checks. I'm like, are you in the last that century or something. I go, you have to take credit cards. So I got him to use Square. But with Square, now Square sees how much money he's making. And so if someone's making a lot of money, Square is like, oh, you're a good credit risk. Let's loan you some money. So now they're increasing their business to not just payments, but becoming a bank because they got the data. Okay, so selling data is not new. Grocery stores, when they put in the barcode scanners, it was to manage inventory. So what was that in the math equation? It was a cost. But now, one of my professors worked with Safeway and said, hey, we have all this data. Let's package it in reports. So now Safeway, the grocery store, generates $10 million with reports from the data they collected. So the barcode scanner is a revenue generator. Pretty cool, huh? That you can take something that actually was a cost and make it to a revenue generator. So last example. This is World of Warcraft kid, Max. Okay, he has now become responsible and he's an engineer. And he no longer plays World of Warcraft. So he comes home and says, Mom, you screwed up my life when you canceled World of Warcraft. I go, what do you mean? Well, that's his cousin. So he's making $1,800 a month. That's his cousin, Patrick. Patrick is making $2,000 a month playing World of Warcraft. While Max is an engineer working on machines and making $1,800. Is there something wrong with this picture? Okay, so what happened is there was a video streaming service called Justin TV. Justin TV built a platform for video streaming. Anyone could go in and stream. Like we could be streaming this class for free. And their business model was to sell advertising. But advertisers didn't want to buy because they didn't know who you're streaming to. The platform was streaming anything to anybody. Got it? And so Justin TV was going to die because people weren't buying advertising. Justin, the CEO, called the VPs and said, hey, we have 6 months worth of money. I want each of you to take our technology and come up with a new business model. And one of their CEOs came up with Twitch and using their video streaming platform and to focus it only on gamers. Now they got good gamers to come online and stream when they're playing. And right here, there's 20,000 people watching this person play World of Warcraft. And then this athletics thing knows that they're a bunch of gamers, so now they want to advertise because they're advertising, reaching the people they want to reach. And then what Twitch does is share some of the ad revenue with the player, so the player will come on and stream on Twitch. Isn't this brilliant? So they were making sure everyone in the value chain were benefiting, so they would participate. And in the end, Justin TV was losing money, and 3 years later, Amazon bought them for $970 million of cash. And what did they do? Transform their business model. There, that is the purpose of this talk. Now, are you all inspired to do business models and give up your research? Just kidding. Research, value proposition plus value extraction equals a successful business. Thank you. We're running a little bit behind. Can you just take a 5-minute break and then Jason's going to come and show you how to do financial projections. Okay? So just kind of take a break. I know there's only one bathroom here, but there's a bathroom behind at work. 10 minutes. Okay. had on his calendar. And then we switched it till April. We forgot to tell him. And then he had already booked a trip for his girlfriend to Italy. So he wasn't here the first 2 days. Did he make the right choice? Should he have canceled his trip? No. Well, he was in Florence yesterday sending me pictures. But he is here today, and what he's going to do is he's done a lot of entrepreneurship, and he basically started a bunch of companies which he did fundraising for, and he's going to talk about the financial models that you need to do to present to an investor, and some of the things that you need to think about when you're talking to those investors. So, are we ready? Oh, did we sit here and applause for him? Okay, go for it.
All right. So thank you for the very generous introduction, Gigi. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Can you see me at the back? Can you hear me down there? It's all right? All right, perfect. So quick introduction to myself. So I was fortunate enough to do my PhD at the University of Oxford in chemical physics. I spent about the last 10 years delivering scientific hardware, software, firmware, every level of particle accelerator stuff. And I met Gigi actually, I think 6 years ago now out in Hong Kong at a very similar boot camp to what you guys are sitting now. And that was kind of the start of my entrepreneurial journey. So I have been involved with a few different ventures, 3 different startups now. The main one that I pushed forward through the University of Oxford was a medical startup called Yoxley. We were incubated in Oxford's accelerator hub, but that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, the foundry. It closed down shortly after COVID. But during that period, you know, it was direct to customer, B2C healthcare sales. In total, me and the team of 3 in total raised about 1.5 million. My 2 co-founders still doing it. I decided to hire someone to replace myself as technical co-founder within the 3. But as I say, we've raised about 1.5 million. Those 2 are still going with it, and I'm currently spending time doing different ventures and hopefully helping you guys figure out what to do with your ventures as well. So just a quick note, something I like to say at the beginning of every talk is there's an exception to every rule, right? So no matter what advice you hear from even industry experts or people like myself or Gigi or anyone else who's come to give you a talk, there will be exceptions to this, right? So if you say a business needs to make money, well, we've already spoken about things like Twitter or Uber, right? These companies famously did not make money for a long time, or businesses need to be lean, right? Google hired famous chefs and masseurs, and they weren't lean at all, right? Or even something like there's no need for that product, Lyft, Monzo, Facebook, right? They were all entering into marketplaces that were already existing. So what you have to decide is listen to the advice that's given to you, but also figure out whether or not that's going to be fitting for your business and whether or not you want to go with the advice you're being given or you want to take a different route, right? But what I would also strongly say is if you're going to go against the grain, make sure there's a reason for it, right? So we spoke about Twitter and Uber not making any money, right? Why are they still successful despite the fact they weren't making money, right? They weren't generating net profits. Think about this for Uber. Why was that the case? Anyone? Exactly, right? So they spent a lot of money. They took investors' money and they just subsidized their business model. They drove out all the competition. They grew their market share. And as soon as they were happy with what they had, they could turn that tap off and they started generating huge amounts of profits, right? What about Twitter? We spoke about that. There was some discussion in Gigi's talk just now. What happened with Twitter, right? They lost money almost all their time. They got sold to Elon Musk. And why did Elon Musk buy Twitter, right? That's the important question. Why did Elon Musk buy Twitter? Actually, the right answer, right? So think about it. What was he buying? Was he buying something to make money? Is that the reason why he bought it? Exactly. It was influence. That was the product. The product was not money, but it was the influence. And he bought that, right? He could just overnight take the loans and buy all that influence instantly. So as I say, just make sure that if you do decide to go against the grain, you have a good reason for doing that, right? So let's talk a little bit about financial modeling. So you guys are all in teams now, right? So I'm going to show you a picture, and I'm just going to look for your reactions, right? All right, so you either were doing this or this, right? So you need someone on your team who can basically handle numbers. It's really good if that's a CEO. Often you'll have a CEO who's doing pitching. They may be very heavily involved with the finances. If your CEO is not fluent in Excel, you need someone who is, like a CFO, right? You need someone who's going to be able to do this. Your finances are going to be extremely important to your company. Make sure you have someone on board who can do that, or if you need to, you can outsource this. But this is absolutely crucial. You need to quantify the parts of your business, right? Even if you're just estimating, you do need to quantify how your business is going to operate. So you may have heard these terms before, bottom up and top down. So the very simple way of describing these is if you have, let's say, 25,000 customers, they're paying 10,000 each in revenue, you get 250 million in revenue, right? So you just build your model from your base assumptions. You can also talk about your top-down modeling. So you say, okay, the total market is 5 billion. We're going to capture 5% of this. That's going to give us 250 million in revenue, right? In my experience, if you ask investors, a whole room full of investors, which they prefer, 50% are going to give you one, 50% are going to give you the other, right? My advice to you would be prepared to do both of these. Be prepared for what your audience is going to want. Make sure you can justify this either way, right? So if you do a top-down model and it gives you a completely different number from your bottom-up, then something is wrong with your models, right? You need to make these numbers match up because otherwise something is wrong. In order to do this, we need to make estimates. And being realistic with these estimates is extremely important, right? So it feels great if you make a model and you're like, okay, I can generate $20 billion worth of revenue in 1 year. Okay, this is going to be a great company. But if your numbers that are going into this model are completely unrealistic, this isn't helpful for you and it's not helpful for your investors, right? And ultimately, this model, the realistic model, is a very important tool to say, what are you going to do with your business? What's going to change? And how are you going to make your business better, right? So when you're making these estimates, you're getting these numbers to put into your model. Using realistic values is very important. And you can get this from a variety of places. One source would be companies that are adjacent, right, to your business space, right? So what is realistic for this? So I'll walk you through an example of this in a moment. But before we do that, we're also going to talk about other examples of making estimates. So if we want to say, for example, how big is the UK washing machine market? So let's say that I have invented a new method of washing clothes, right? And I want to break into the UK's washing machine market. So how am I going to estimate what this market is, right? Is that? All right, perfect, right, very good. Right, so first of all, we can get to the amount of households, but how am I going to get to the amount of households, right? Right, good. Exactly, right. So I can take my population of the UK, that's data, that's accessible. I can say, well, what's the population in the UK? It's about 70 million people, right? I can say, well, how big is the average household? It's between 2 and 3 people, right? It doesn't really matter what this number is, whether you're taking 2 or 3, this is just an estimate, right? Say it's 2.5, we can put that in and we can get the number of total households we have, right? Each of these has a washing machine. What's the lifespan of this washing machine, right? Doesn't matter take a guess. What do you think it is? 3 to 5 years, let's say 5 years, right? It's just an estimate, right? So we have the total number of households, we have the average span of a washing machine. We know that each of those households every 5 years is going to be buying a washing machine. And finally, what's the average cost of that washing machine? 300, right? Something like this, right? So we can take all of these numbers, we put them together. So we have a population of the UK of about 70 million people. That's going to be about 25 million households. If the lifespan of an average washing machine is about 5 years, that's about 5 million washing machines sold every year, right? And so if that's £300 per washing machine, it's actually quite a big number for the UK washing machine market, right? And the beauty about doing these kind of things is that it will just get you used to putting numbers in. Whether or not the average household size is 2 people or 3 people, it's actually not going to change the overall picture very much, right? It's called a Fermi estimate. Has anyone come across this term before? Oh, good. Okay, the research scientist, right? And these can be very useful for your modeling. you say, okay, we don't have this particular statistic available, but how can we get to an estimate of this statistic? How is this going to inform our model, right? This is really important. Let me talk about a company that I was advising and working with a few months ago. So this was a founder who essentially had a new method of running medical imaging, right? Very early stages, very prototype. And there were kind of two business models for this, right? B2C, you open up these clinics, you sell the scans to the individuals coming into these clinics, or you go B2B2C, right? You license the technology to clinics and hospitals, and they use that technology to help with their patients. And I spoke to this founder, and he said he really didn't think that it was worth going down this route over here, the second one, because he didn't want the overhead of having to deal with the extra administration, the people in the middle taking the cuts, right, and all this. And so we have these two options. He was really keen on opening up the clinics, going straight to the customer, trying to be as efficient as possible, right? So do we have any like MBA students or anything in the room today? There's this expression like owning the vertical, right? Do you guys know this, right? So if you can own the vertical, you may be able to produce something more efficient. So here we have the two options, which is B2C and B2B2C. So hands up if you think option number one is the route to go down. Hands up if you think option number two is the route to go down. All right, that's pretty, hands up if you didn't put your hand up. People hedging their bets. It's actually probably better to hedge your bets in this situation. Why? Because I've not told you anything about this model, right? This is the point, is that we can model both of these scenarios, and the data will help to inform your opinion, right? We have these two options, and we have an intuition about which one is better, but actually the data and the modeling is going to help us decide which one of these is better, right? We don't need to guess at this. So I've put this down, which says, data helps to inform your opinion. This, the original phrasing of this is actually, without data, this is just your opinion, right? And then that's actually something you should really bear in mind, right? Without data, this is just your opinion. So I walked through this exercise with him. First of all, you have to identify your customer. Now, Gigi spoke a lot about this in the last talk. Who is your customer? If you're a company that's, for example, just selling to like Boeing or something like this, you're only going to have one customer. Or it might be that you're going direct to your consumers and you say, okay, these consumers are my customers, or you're going B2B2C and your customers are in fact your clinics or even like your big medical insurance companies, right? You need to identify who they are and what problem you're solving for them. And hopefully Gigi's spoken to you about what the value you're providing to your customer is, right? So what's the difference between buying a can of Coke in a supermarket versus buying a Coke when you're seeing a show in a theater, right? Why can one of them charge 50p and one of them charges £7, right? What's the difference, right? You're solving a very different problem for your customer, even if your product is ostensibly the same, right? So figure out what problem you're actually solving for your customer, and see what value you can get from that, right? And it is totally fine, by the way, to make multiple models. We're going to do it for this one situation, which is B2C medical imaging. And there is this important question of, will your customer stay with you, right? So if you have the monopoly on your product and your customers have to have your product, then your customers will be forced to stay with you, right? So this is what we call a completely inelastic demand curve, right? So let's say that you're the only water supplier in your area. The people have no choice but to pay whatever you want for your water, right? But you have to be very careful about customers staying with you versus customers leaving, what's called your churn rate. Make sure that you have this in your model as well, right? Are other people going to enter the market? Are they going to take your customers from you? Are you going to be able to retain them? So something that I see very often is that when people do financial modeling, they are very optimistic about customer retention, right? So can you think of any examples where companies have very low churn rates, right? Where companies retain their customers very well? Apple are really good at locking people into their ecosystem because they provide everything all in one platform. Any others? Was that? Well, that is actually a good example, although slightly unethical practices of yes, locking people into their products as well. So I'm thinking about things like Netflix, right? So Netflix have historically a very low churn rate in comparison to other companies, or Amazon Prime, right? Once people subscribe, they get used to those features, and they can't get those features from anywhere else, so they stay locked in. This is where it goes back to being realistic about your numbers. People love to say, okay, I'm just going to estimate that my churn rate is going to be 5%, right? I'm going to keep 95% of my customers. If you look at these wildly successful companies with historically very low churn rates, their churn rates are still 5 to 10%, right? So do you think you're going to be able to retain your customers better than Netflix retains their customers? If the answer is yes, that's great, right? But if you're being realistic about your company, is the answer still yes, right? So when you're doing these financial models, you generally want to do them on a 5-year period. A good model to show your investors, especially if you're starting off. And we had some backwards and forwards, and we just said, okay, by year 5, he's going to have opened 4 clinics, and he's going to be servicing 18,000 customers, let's say, and we have a churn rate of 20%. Okay, these are just numbers. This is just building the model for now, and we'll see what happens. And it's always nice if you can graph out your data, because you can see what difference those numbers are making, right? You change the numbers, your graph is going to change. You can see if it makes sense. It also lets you see if you've made a mistake very easily, right? So we have our total number of customers. Tied in with this is the business models that Gigi was talking about. So how are you actually generating revenue? There are many different ways of generating your revenue. How are you going to monetize them? You may have them just paying directly up front for your services, for your product. And this is the important part here. So non-recurring revenue versus recurring revenue, right? So can anyone think of an example where you only get non-recurring revenue, one-off payments, basically for all of your customers, right? A what? A car? I don't know, actually. I think a lot of people end up having brand loyalties to cars, and they'll come back as a customer after 5 or 10 years if they've had a good experience. Yeah, I think this is a good example. So people buy and sell houses so infrequently that actually you don't get a lot of recurring revenue. And a couple of other suggestions from the back. I don't know about construction companies, actually. I think they actually get a lot of recurring revenue. I think that they work a lot with architects, and the architects will then work with the construction companies they know very well. I think at the back. What's that? Mattresses. Mattresses is also an interesting one. People don't replace mattresses very often. There's not a lot of brand loyalty there, so I think that's probably a good example. And I'll take one more over there. Good, okay. A coffin shop, right? This is the classic one, or funeral services, is that you will only ever in your lifetime purchase this product once, right? You're never going to get recurring revenue from this because it's by nature something you only purchase once, right? So just think about how the product that you're offering is going to play into those 2 different kinds of revenue. Let's talk about like a gym subscription, right? A gym subscription is going to be your example of recurring revenue, but you're also going to potentially get non-recurring revenue. For example, if there's a sign-up fee, right? This is very common with gyms. You get both of these. And as Gigi was saying, recurring revenue is becoming really important for investors, right? They want to see that you are going to be able to extract value out constantly from your customers. Test your revenue if you can, right? So again, this is all speculation until you get data, and getting data is very hard. You can, before you go to market, you can do testing in terms of surveys. Surveys is a very expensive way of doing that. Try to design little experiments just to say, what are people going to pay? What are people willing to pay for your product, right? And there's this term called A/B testing. Have you guys come across this before? Right, so you can take half of the people who are doing your testing, give them one product or one situation, one circumstance, and the other half get the other situation, and you just see which one responds better, right? You say, you know, is it better to have a higher subscription fee but no sign-up fee, or is it better to have a sign-up fee with a lower subscription fee? Right? Which one do people respond better to? Now we can speculate against it, but ultimately you can get the data from taking half your people and testing one or the other. A nice thing to do if you're sort of in your alpha stage is to do things online And depending upon people's IP, you can actually show them different websites, show them different products, show them different pricing, right? And this will give you the data in order to push your revenue models forward. You certainly can. So I would still put that under A/B testing, right? So the question is, are you running an experiment? Are you trying to find out data, or are you trying to generate revenue, right? So if you're trying to run an experiment to find this out, then this is just testing. This isn't really having two revenue models, right? This is running an experiment to figure out which revenue model is best. But there are many companies out there that have multiple revenue sources and different revenue models, right? Amazon, for example, Gigi talked about AWS, like this is going to be business customers versus taking commission from marketplace sellers, right? It's completely different setup, and it's different ways of monetizing your audience, right? Okay. So in this case, for this company, it's simply kept it simple, just a flat charge of £200 per scan, right? And again, in this situation, the question is, what are you actually selling to this person, right? You're not just selling their medical test results, but you're selling peace of mind, right? You're selling convenience. You're selling being able to get these scans without having to go through lots of legislation, lots of paperwork, all this. And there is no sign-up fee for this, so per acquisition or your non-recurring revenue is non-existent, right? So you have your number of customers. They are declining due to churn, but we're still getting annual scans for these customers, right? Now we need to take into account our costs. So staff costs, including the founders, right? Presumably most of you will need to be paid to be working on this. Your workspaces and your development costs. So people often underestimate the cost of renting out offices or workshops or these kind of things, right? If you're doing product development, if you're doing something physical, you're probably going to need somewhere to do that. It is a little bit easier now if you can have fully remote offices for people. It will save you money, but whether or not that's a good decision to go fully remote, that is a different question. The ones that I see underestimated a lot are legal fees and cost of customer acquisition, right? So I know there's at least one lawyer in the room. I mean, do we have any other lawyers in the room? Everyone looks around. Okay, so if you're going to be setting up a business, the legal fees are probably going to surprise you as to how expensive they are, right? If you're going B2B2C, right, you need to set up a contract with the second business, and that is surprisingly expensive. So if you have lawyer friends who are working in the industry, just see if you can get a feel for how expensive that's going to be, right? If you want to have a website and it's just a placeholder website and you need a cookies policy, guess how much cookies policy costs that's going to be looked over by a lawyer? That's about $2,000, yeah. So that is just to have a landing page with nothing else on it. That's just your cookies policy, right? So legal fees, don't underestimate them. If you're looking at having your lawyers draw up a contract for you between your company and another company, I would probably say, depending on the complexity of the contract, between 10 and 20,000, right? Don't forget about insurance within that if you're customer facing as well. Insurance can be very expensive depending upon what sector you're operating in. If you're operating in the med tech sector, this can be extremely expensive, right? Another 20, 30,000 a year. Cost of customer acquisition. So this is going to change depending upon what kind of business you're talking about. If you're talking about, selling to businesses, you're probably going to have a sales team, right? And that sales team is going to have to go out and have meetings. If we're talking about B2C, then we're talking about advertising, essentially, right? And an important part of this is, what is your conversion rate, right? Have you guys heard of this term? So if I show this advert to 100 people, how many of them actually get converted over to buy my product, right? And let's say it costs me, I don't know, 10p to show this to 100 people, right? It's cost me £10 in total to show this to 100 people. But if my conversion rate is only, let's say, 10%, it's cost me £1 to sell that product, right? That's simply my cost of customer acquisition, right? And your cost of customer acquisition, if you're B2C, is usually very high. So a very important formula is your cost of customer acquisition divided by your lifetime value, right, of your customer. So in this case, built-in cost of customer acquisition, built in the scanning costs per person, right? That had to be looked over by a medical professional and scaled up the number of staff according to the number of customers, right? So these are not independent figures. Of course, you would only have, in this case, 20 staff if you were able to hit that target of 18,000 scans by year 5, right? And including that workplace and legal, and you can see how those costs get split up. Yes. You are. So I think there's 2 approaches you can take to it. So one is to say, what makes sense based upon what we know, right? So how are you going to advertise? How much is that cost of advertisement? And what do you think your conversion rate is going to be? And this is where looking at adjacent businesses can be very useful. So for example, if you're a company that's going to be advertising mostly through apps, let's say that you're, I don't know, a gaming company that does apps, and you're advertising on other games, right? Well, you can find out what that cost per click is going to be, right? How much do you think the cost of per click is? So somewhere between 50p and £2 per click, which is very, very high. And then you can look at your conversion rate. Now, your conversion rate is obviously going to be somewhere between 0 and 100%. Realistically, it's probably going to be the low end of that, like single-digit percents. And this may give you an idea of your cost of customer acquisition. There are many different ways of acquiring customers, and this is a very simplified model which just comes from advertising. But for example, referrals are really good because referrals actually will cost you money. That's fine, but you're much more likely to get conversions through it, right? You have split conversion models and split revenue models where the person doing the referral will also get half of that referral bonus, and this works really well. I'm sure everyone in this room has probably been referred and got a referral bonus for certain things, right? And built within that is also the segmentation of your customers, right? If you're doing referral, for example, you can probably access customers that are giving you a lot of revenue much more easily, right? Because they're similar to your customers that are already generating revenue for you. And so it's not just always a flat approach to how you're going to acquire these customers, but there may be lots of different ways to do this. So there's a great strategy. It's called pirate growth hacking. It's got nothing to do with pirates. It's just that the acronym is like AAARG. So it sounds like what a pirate would say. But if you're building a B2C business, it's worth looking into for those reasons, right? It's about trying to keep your cost of customer acquisition low. But yeah, we can build this into the model, and we can see how those numbers will change what the outcome is. So finally, we have 2 other things we need to think about. So CapEx and cash in the bank. So previously, we've spoken about our costs. Those are operating costs, right? We have to pay our staff. We have to pay for maintenance and things like this. Capital expenditure is different. Capital expenditure is when you have to pay for something, but you have recoverable money from what you're spending, right? So if you're buying, for example, vehicles, or you're buying buildings, or you're buying factories, you can still sell those at a later date, right? Those are still assets that your company will have, but you're going to need the money in order to buy them. And the very last thing is cash in the bank, right? So how much cash do you want your company to have? You don't want to be every month going to £0 or into your overdraft or whatever this is, right? You need a minimum level of cash to keep you solvent, to make sure that you can account for everything. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that cash aspect later on to show you why that's very important, to make sure that you have a minimum level of cash depending upon your size of your company. So Gigi showed you this in the last talk, which is revenue subtract costs equals, in her slides, profits. I call it EBITDA. So just earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. In the UK, in fundraising, this is very common parlance to use. So it's just to say, okay, this is what our profits are going to be before we have to start doing things like paying tax, paying interests. If we bought this truck, it's lost value, and this is the number that we want to be aiming for. So we can put all this into the model, and this is what the model shows. And this is very common, right? So revenue's going up over the years. This is just the blue curve, and our EBITDA or our profit is negative to begin with because we are spending a lot of money developing, renting out. We don't have that many customers, but around year 3 we hit break even, and by year 5 we're saying that it's generating 1.5 million in profits, right? And we have to get through this part over here where we're not generating any money, right? We need to raise money in order to do that, depending on your business, right? Your business is going to have different costs. Some businesses are going to be very small, some businesses are going to be very high, but ultimately it's likely that you're going to need to raise funding to get through those negative years, right? Does that make sense? And that funding amount is simply the sum of what those negative parts are. And in this case, it's 512,000. That's what the model says, right? It's an approximation. So 500,000 in order to, over 5 years, build a business that's generating 1.5 million per year. Does this sound like a good business? All right. You have to give me a yes or a no, right? All right. The answer, from an investor's point of view, is almost certainly no, right? And I'm going to show you why. So, but before we do that, what I want to show you is we ran the model again under the assumptions of going B to B to C, right? And what happened there, right? We have B to C on the left. It's generating about 1.5 million in year 5 with a 500,000 pound raise. B to B to C, much bigger market, many more customers. Okay, licensing, you don't generate as much per customer, but you access so many more customers. This requires more funding. You need to do all the setup with the legal. It's nearly 2 million in funding, but after 5 years, the model projects that it's going to be earning 200 million, right, in cash every year. And so this is the difference. And of course, when I ran this exercise with the founder, I was like, do you still think that B2C is the right option? What do you think he said? Right, absolutely not, right? He instantly changed because, and it's driven by the data, right? This is a model. Maybe the numbers are wrong, right? But ultimately, the assumptions go into both of these models. And you have to say, which one of these do I believe in? Which one of these gives me the greatest chance of success? Okay, on the right-hand side, the raise is higher, but the reward is much, much higher, right? And it was instantly clear to him that he should be pursuing the option on the right, which is good. So let's talk a little bit about fundraising itself. When you form your company, you will split your shares in the company between yourself and the co-founders. If you're a solo co-founder or solo founder, of course, you're going to own 100% of the company. You will typically have what's called a vesting period within this, right? Has anyone come across this term before? Right. So you don't get all of your shares at the beginning, but you have typically what's called a 1-year cliff, 4-year vest. So at the end of 4 years, you've got all of your shares, and you don't get any of your shares until at least 1 year. And this is a very common vesting structure. The reason behind this is that, let's say that you and your co-founder work on something for 9 months together, and then they leave after 9 months, right? Is it good if they take half the company with them, or whatever percentage you've agreed, right? Your company's going to die if you do this, right? And so this is also the same of employees. So employees that join your company will often have vesting periods, very similar 1-year cliff, 4-year vest. And this is what investors need to see. An investor is extremely unlikely to invest in your company without a vesting structure in place, because they don't want, for example, to invest their money in your company and then you guys just say, okay, this co-founder's leaving with half the company and they're taking half the money, right? They want you to be locked in, and they want you to be committed to building this company. Yeah. So your total vesting period is the total period after which you would attain 100% linearly, right? So after 2 years, you would have vested 50%, and if you leave after 2 years, you get 50%. Your cliff is if you leave before this, you get nothing, right? And so you, 1 quarter, that's right, yes. Usually, yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you usually extend it then by 1 year? So do you give an option then for the 5th year?
Not usually, no.
No, sometimes they will give, if you're a really good employee and they didn't give you very much stock to begin with, but you're super hot shit and you're not making that much and another company's offering more, so they may give you a refresh 2 years in. You got it? But you have to be hot shit. Like really. Teasing me.
So ultimately, it's about incentives, right? Is you want to have your employees, your good employees, stay in the company as long as possible, and giving them shares over a vesting period is a way of doing this, right?
You have vested your shares
Mhm.
as a founder. How do you incentivize if you have like 3 or 4 founders and allow them to just leave after 4 years?
So it depends. The question, I think the question is like, who is trying to do the incentivization here, right? If you're an investing company, right? If you're a VC, you kind of want your founding team to stay as long as possible. And what that may mean is that when you sign your term sheet, they say, we don't care about how much you vested. We're actually going to restart your vesting now, right? That is not uncommon. It's negotiable. It's not very nice to the founders, but if the founders are really committed for the next 4 years, it doesn't really make a difference. Sometimes you might compromise and say, okay, let's keep the shares that we've already vested, but we're going to have a new vesting period for the remaining shares or something like this, right? It's a negotiation in the end. If you have a lot of leverage because you are really strong for the company and you're generating lots of value, then you as an employee or you as a founder can leverage that. But ultimately, this is going to be dependent upon your company and what's good for both the company and for yourself. So, yeah.
They get new executive packages, and they're huge because their pay isn't based on their yearly salary. Like some people will take a yearly salary of 100,000, but they get a refresh package such that if the company's value goes up during the next 2 years, they'll get a gigantic stock grant. And so they keep paying with all these stock things. And then when a founder or CEO sells a big chunk of stock, usually there's some regulation around that, and then secondly, it's not good because it means, oh, they're selling stock, it must be ready to go down. This is going into very complicated stuff, but like this class is really teaching you the basics. So this stuff you might want to just follow it on the news, talk to lawyers, but like Jason's giving you a really good just fundamentals.
Yeah, this is what you need to think about when you're starting. I think we had another question over there.
CEO when it goes from seed to Series A. So, like, what happens when they got fired? Halfway through the way.
Well, if any employee gets fired, then they will not see out their shares. It will depend upon the terms of the agreements. So there's different things like good leavers, bad leavers, and things like this. So you might think that a bad leaver is someone who goes nuclear, destroys the company. They're not going to get half their shares, right? But a bad leaver, actually, depending upon how it's defined, may even be just someone who has to quit for personal reasons, right? So a example of a good leaver that I've seen in provisions who gets to keep their shares is someone who literally like dies with no without any warning, right? That's what's classified as a good leaver. So this comes down to the devil's in the details. But if you are ousted out or fired, you're unlikely to see out the rest of your shares. Right? It would be unusual for that. Yeah. So anyway, so this is how we form our company. Our founders have our shares, right? And when we raise funds, we generally issue new shares and sell those shares to investors, right? So this is a graph that is very important. We have time on the bottom axis and profit on the left-hand axis. Bear in mind that these are not necessarily linear scales, right? And as I showed you before in that model, often what happens for a company is that we have to survive those first few years where we're not generating net profit, right? That's called our valley of death. That's where the company is going to die unless we can turn things around and hit our break-even point, right? And during this time, we're going to raise capital in order to cover things like our development costs, our initial prototyping, our staff salaries, depending upon what they are. And those will normally come from angels and the 4 Fs. And when we get into later stages, we'll look into VCs, right? So let's focus on this early stage first for angels and the 4 Fs. Does anyone know what the 4 Fs are? Friends, family, fools, good. And you guys are the founders, right? Oh, don't know where my title's gone. So founders, friends, families, and fools, right? These are the people close to you. These are the people that you may raise from in order to get your first 10,000, 20,000 pounds in through the door. Of course, if you're investing time, then you as a founder are investing in the company, right? Even if you're quitting your job and you're paying yourself from your savings, you are investing in the company. If you have the privilege of living in your family's basements, they are investing in you. So don't forget them if you make it big, right? We have angels. So angels are generally high net worth individuals that will invest in your company. In this country, I would say anything between 20,000, 200,000 going in. So be very aware of different tax benefits, right? So why do you think these people are putting money into your company, right? They want to get a return. So they want high returns. What don't they like, right? They don't like risk, right? And so the beautiful thing about SEIS and EIS, so Seed Enterprise Initiative Schemes and Enterprise Initiative Schemes, are that in this country, if you're a high net worth individual, you're probably paying a lot of tax, right? And what you can do is you can invest in companies, early stages, and you get that money off your tax, right? So to put that into context, if you're an ultra high net worth individual, for every pound that you put in to one of these companies, you may be guaranteed up to 87.5p back from your tax, right? So your risk is almost minimal, right? If you have the right high net worth individuals. So in some ways, these schemes are like subsidized gambling for like the rich, right? But this is why people are going to invest, because they have high returns, but also low risk. That's what they want to see, right? And finally, from your early stage funding sources, you may also get grants and competitions. So applying to the government, I think Ryan Johnson came and spoke to you about some of the resources available there yesterday, but also competitions. They're not as lucrative as they used to be. I think a lot of these banks and things that used to sponsor them, they're seeing the profits dry up a little bit. The free money is nice, right? You're not giving away equity in this case, but it can be time consuming. So just bear this in mind. The reason why I've put these two together as well is also that be a little bit careful about how your grants play with your tax incentive schemes, because taking a grant from the government may actually invalidate your tax incentive schemes. And what you don't want to do is then take an investor's money, promising that they would be eligible for these tax schemes, and then not be able to fulfill that, right? You're not going to have a good relationship with them afterwards. So let's talk about an example of investing. We'll try and speed up because I know it's lunchtime. Let's say that Alice invests 150,000 for 15% of your startup, right? We're going to say that that's a £1 million valuation, right? 150K for 15%. If the startup later becomes worth 10 million in this case, Alice is still going to own 15%. Let's not worry too much about dilution at this stage. It's just top level. So her shares have also 10x, right? Her shares, she can sell those for 1.5 million, right? So when you're asking investors for money, you should be, one of the important things you need to tell them is to say, how is their investment going to make the company that they're investing in more valuable, right? They want the return. So you're going to say, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to hire this person, this person, this person, or I'm going to produce this product, or I'm going to be able to reach out to this market. And that is going to make the company more valuable, which is going to make their investment more valuable, right? And this is something you need to communicate to your investors, your potential investors, to show them how you're going to grow their money. Do keep in mind how much equity you're giving away, right? If you give away too much equity, you're giving away your company. You need to make sure that you're not giving away too much. This is a graph of how much equity is given away in UK funding rounds. You see that actually the majority is about 15%. That's pretty common. These little ones are just that's skewed by very early stage investments, right? So these the 4Fs putting in 5,000 or 10,000, right, to get 3% of the company. So they make very small investments early on, very small amount of equity. You do not want to be giving away, 15% of your company for a £10,000 investment, right? This is going to kill your company before it starts, right? If you give away too much of the pie early on, there's not enough for the later stage investors. So just be very careful about that. So as your company matures, again, this nice graph at the bottom, time along the bottom axis, the value of your company should be going up and the risk should be going down. And what that means is you'll have different investors coming in at different stages with different profiles, right? Someone at the very early stages is not going to want to invest 1 million or 2 million if the risk profile is very high, right? Unless the reward is very high. But generally what you will have is different investors for different stages, and VCs will start coming in once you've shown some traction, once you've shown with your first, let's say 200,000 that you've raised from other people, that you can actually do something with it, that you have a product that you're going to be able to offer to people, right? If you're going to VCs, your market size is very important. So VCs often need a minimum market size because your companies need to go stratospheric, right? 95% of the VC applications are immediately discarded. They're just thrown into the bin because the market size isn't big enough. So if you look at the stats behind the companies, right, about half of them don't give any return, right? And about another 35% of them just exist, right? They're not actually giving a return. Doubling your money kind of sounds good, but not for a VC, right? This is not good because you're losing money on these other 50% of them. And about 5% of your companies end up going stratospheric, right? So we're saying 9xing or 20xing, right? And we need that small fraction of companies that go stratospheric to make up for all the other ones where the investment didn't work out very well, even for VCs, right? So these people are putting in $1 million. They want to see returns of 20 million, 50 million on this 1 million investment, right? And so if your market size is too small, they will not invest in you because even if you're wildly successful, you can't give the return that they want, right? Does that make sense to everyone? So this is for VCs. If you're not going to be VC pitching, that's fine. But this is something to bear in mind, is that you do need to have a very suitable market size because it will be the first filter for every VC. So you may have heard this term as well, runway. So this is just the available cash divided by how much you're spending every month, right? So you might say, okay, we have this amount of money in the bank. This is 18 months worth of runway. Running low on funds can be really dangerous for your company. So if you have 6 months of runway, does that sound like a lot or a little, right? It's not very much at all, right? Because let's say that you've built this company, you have 5 employees. Are you going to say to your employees, okay, I've only got 6 months of funding in the bank, right? What do you think your employees might do? Right? They might leave, right? And if your employees start leaving, then this is kind of your death spiral for your company. So you have a horrible choice here. Are you going to tell the employees or you're not going to tell the employees, right? This is totally personal, right? There is no right answer here. You just want to avoid the situation in general because, of course, if you tell the employees, they might leave. But if you don't tell them, then are you going to have the heart to, on the last day, just be like, okay, we're out of money. Sorry, you guys, you're all fired, right? This is pretty tough as a CEO. Even if you can raise money, it may require what's called the down round, right? So as I showed you before, you want the value of your company to continuously go up. This is what makes your investors happy. If you're running out of money and you haven't hit your metrics, you may need to raise money at a lower value, right? The value of your company may go down. And this also can initiate very often the death spiral of a company, because rather than being on the upward trajectory, your company is now on a downward trajectory, and fewer people want to put money into your company. And you'll eventually just run out of money, right? So this is not good as well. Something to really avoid, running low on funds. You want to make sure that you're having a minimum amount of cash in the bank for what you're doing. So just a couple more slides. Some general points on fundraising strategy. Have a plan, right? You have to have a plan about what you're going to do financially and how you're going to spend that money once you have it, right? Make sure that it makes sense. Make sure that if your model is challenged, you can back up those assumptions. Leave plenty of time. Fundraising often takes longer than you think. You may go out and talk to a VC tomorrow and they're just like, this sounds amazing, I want in, no problem. That is rarely the case. If you're doing fundraising either from angels or VCs, I would probably budget at least 1 year in order to do this full time, right? So often it's a full-time job to do fundraising. It takes at least 1 year to close a round properly. So just bear this in mind for your timescales. You don't want to be running out of money, as I showed you before. Leverage your network, right? If you have people that you can speak to, people who can make warm introductions, use them, right? So there's this phrase that I hate, but it's definitely true, which is your net worth is your network, right? So how well connected are you? Can you get people to put you in contact to make those warm introductions? Because if so, you're much more likely to at least get a conversation out of this, right? So at the early stages, leverage your network. This is incredibly important. Build relationships. So it's part of your networking, but also even if you're too early stage, right, for an investor, right? Let's say that you're looking to raise 100,000, but their minimum check size is 500,000. You can still talk to these people, right? You can still get feedback. It's actually better to do that because they can objectively tell you what's good or bad about your pitch, right? And so when you've spoken to these people, they can tell you, okay, you know, this is the part that we're excited about, and this is the part we weren't excited about, and you can then change your pitch or think about your model, take that to the smaller investors, and later on, because you've built this relationship, you can talk to these bigger firms a year later and just say, okay, this is what we've done, we've changed this, we took this advice on, because they'll tell you exactly what you need to change in order to make your company interesting for them, right? So this is a really good strategy. Make sure you build those relationships. It's never too early to talk to people, right? And that's not just for VCs, but also people in a similar space, or even your competitors, right? You'll be very surprised at how happy and willing people are to talk to you about, you know, if you're working on something similar or if you're in the same space. They'll tell you about the problems they encountered. They'll tell you what people liked and what they didn't like, right? So just try and build those relationships. Know your audience. So you're not just saying, I'm asking for money, right? There are many reasons why different people will invest, and make sure that you know what their investing ethos is, right? Maybe they want to have more of a social impact. Maybe they want to reach out to particular audiences, right? So if you know this, you should tailor your pitch for those people because they are important. So creating FOMO, this is really important, right? So do you guys know FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So if you know that you need to raise, for example, $1 million, then if you can get some early yeses to generate that first 250,000 or even that first 500,000, the other people who you might have spoken to earlier, you've built that relationship with, you might be able to go back to them and just say, look, you know, we're closing this round now. We already have 600,000 committed. Just wanted to check, are you interested in this, right? And people will see this. They'll see the other investors that are committed. And they'll be like, oh, actually, if they're committed, if they're going to be in this, then I want to be in this, right? This is a really important strategy. Make sure you maintain good relationships with these people throughout, even if they've said no to you, and try to create this feeling of FOMO for the investors, especially the later stage ones. And finally, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is be resilient, right? You are going to get very likely a lot of no's, right? And this can be really difficult to cope with. But again, just see this as you are experimenting. You are trying a pitch with an investor. You're seeing what works well and what doesn't work well. And that's going to prepare you for your next pitch, right? You are going to get a lot of no's. And don't be defensive. Don't be aggressive. Try and take what they're saying as advice, right? And again, you have to just decide if you're going to agree with that advice or not. But being resilient during fundraising is really important, right? Make sure you can do that. So just one more thing to say. I'm just going to say what the plan that we came up with for this medical imaging company. So we knew we needed to reach 1.8 million for profitability, right? That's the amount we needed to raise. So we split it into 2 stages. Stage 1, we get 150,000 in from a known investor, angel, right? So we actually already knew someone who was willing to do this. They put in that amount of money, and that allowed 2 of them to basically create the MVP, right? Development, early stages, technical feasibility has been demonstrated. From this, you can then go to other known angels and raise another 250K, right? So they haven't done this yet. They are in the middle of building the MVP. But once they have this, I think it'll be a lot easier for them to raise from other angels, right? To go out there and say, look, this is what we've managed to achieve using this 150K. This is what we're planning to do going further on. That 250K is going to be used to expand the team and pay for legal contracts, right? I don't have time to talk about ASAs now, but I'm happy to talk to anyone about that later. Just a contract for fundraising. So once we have that 400,000, that goes to stage 2, which is to then trial that in hospital, show the benefits, iterate on the technology, show that customers are willing to use and pay for that technology, right? And then raise 1.4 million for venture capital, right? That's going to allow them to expand across all those different hospitals that they were looking for, right? So suddenly this plan should seem a lot more feasible, right? You're raising a small amount. That small amount is going to allow you to hit particular goals, and that's going to allow you to raise more funds and so on and so forth, right? Yes, yes, especially early on, because ultimately, you know, we need 1.8 million to get to profitability or something like this, right? But no one is going to give you 2 million based upon an idea unless it's like really groundbreaking, right? It does happen every now and again. It's very rare though. So again, smaller raises with milestones that are going to show how you're going to hit those bigger milestones, right? We'll get those bigger raises in. Completely, yes. Yes, and this is why angels, anyone who's, so the difference between a fool and an angel is that an angel is rich enough that this doesn't matter to them, essentially, right? An angel is already paying enough tax, for example, that even if the company goes bankrupt and never sees a penny in revenue, it's actually not a big deal because they're still recouping 87% of this back in tax benefits, right? Exactly. The question is usually not if they're going to invest, let's say, 500,000 over different companies. It's which companies they're going to invest their 500,000 in, because they're going to get the tax breaks on this anyway, right? So anyone who has any kind of good experience knows that they're taking a huge risk, but the downside is capped, but the upside is very uncapped, right? And this is good as an investor. So yes, very UK centric. That's SEIS. I spoke about on one of the slides. Yes.
Approximately 40% of his company, because he will lose around 15% if he goes to end his stage. I suppose around 10% when he will try to raise a second 250.
Mm-hmm.
Try to raise 1.4 million.
No, that's a little complicated, and that's where it comes into ASAs. So I can talk about this more in detail later on, but ASAs essentially, the people putting in money here are going to get the valuation from here. And there are good reasons behind that, but yes. They usually get a discount. So the discount helps to offset their risk. So I was asked to keep to 12 o'clock and I've gone 10 minutes past. But essentially, these are different ways of getting shares, getting money for shares in the future, right? So 3 different ways of doing this: convertible loan notes, advanced subscription agreements, and safe agreements. All different pros and cons. Essentially, the one on the left is the most complicated, the one on the right is the most simple. But these are ways of getting money in through the door, but deciding on the equity later. These are 3 different ways, at least in the UK, of doing this. Do I have time to take a few more questions? Is that all right? All right, perfect. Couple of minutes. Yeah, I'll be around all day as well to answer questions. So I'm going to be here for most of the week. Yeah. Yeah, I think those are already in the folder. So for founders, almost certainly this with as low a discount as possible, because complications are bad, and even simple agreements that stray into this area can cause a lot of problems for your company in the future. So yes, safes are probably the best. it depends on your company, but you should look to raise at least 18 months of runway each raise. Yeah, preferably more like 2 years. Oftentimes when you close a round, you immediately start raising for the next round. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to leave you on this slide over here. So I will be around for basically the rest of the week. I will hopefully get to hear some more about your ideas and your ventures. But otherwise, please feel free to come up to me and ask questions about anything, or if you need help with your pitch decks or anything like that, I'll be around as well. So looking forward to meeting you.